And today we're going to have exciting places where this journey has ended that might not have been, easily predicted. How one starts with a background in computer science and becomes a veterinarian, an entrepreneur, or just, how it changes their thinking of how new ideas and things are going to affected their life. So I think this is an exciting session, a different idea. It'll be technical in different ways, but it's more about computer science as the journey. And I think in many cases, this is an interesting aspect of all disciplines, is where, often when we're in college, we don't know where these things are going to lead us, and we're going to find out today. Our first speaker is Mary Szymkowski. She was a graduate student here in the early 90s, and she took an interesting trajectory as after getting a degree in computer science, decided her passion lied in veterinary school, and she in fact went to our other local university, NC State, and in fact found herself in a completely different world and excitement. So we'll have Mary tell you about how computer science led to where she is today. Thank you, Mary.
Great. Thank you. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all today. I never imagined my career path would take me to veterinary medicine when I was here in the late 80s, early 90s. That's why I kind of have two ribbons. I spanned, just like anything else in my life, I had one foot in one decade and one foot in the other decade. But I really do feel like a lot of the lessons I learned here, I still apply on a daily basis when I'm dealing with my patients at the cat hospital. It started out at IBM, 1985, as a software developer working on assembler code. And now I work with wonderful pet owners. This is one of my favorite clients, Greg, and his little kitty, Missy. Greg is not your expected cat owner. He's a father with young daughters. He has 3 young cats that he adopted from a rescue group. He loves these cats to death, and you kind of have an image in your mind of the stereotypical, single cat lady that has 8 or 12 cats in her house. But this gentleman breaks that stereotype, as do many of my clients. I have an amazing array of clients, from a Nobel laureate to a homeless person. So you just never know who's going to come through your doorstep on a daily basis. The foundation, I really have to give credit to Northwestern University, where I did my undergraduate work. This was an extremely competitive environment. I was in the engineering program at Northwestern. It taught me to think. It taught me to analyze problems. It taught me endurance when I had to survive Chicago winters when it was minus 20 degrees outside. And it taught me patience. We were a controlled data university at the time, and so a lot of my programming was in a programming language called Compass for the CDC cyber machine. It was a big deal when you got to run your program on the cyber. I still have boxes of Hollerith cards. I'm kind of a pack rat, so I've saved all those cards. But it really taught me to be a perfectionist in some levels, which has served me well in my surgery time with my patients. I was at Northwestern from 1981 through 1985, and one of the skills that I acquired while there was I did tours for the Tech Institute. It gave me a chance to talk to prospective students about my love of the university, but it also gave me some tour guide experience, which came into play later on in the story here. When I graduated in 1985, I came to IBM Research Triangle Park. I worked on a product called the 3745. It was a network controller. It looks like ancient networking at this point, but it was a real exciting time to be a developer at IBM. They hired a mass amount of new graduates. Everyone around me was in their 20s. It was an exciting time to be a programmer. It was when token ring networking was first getting grounding. A lot of the programming was low level, so you again had to really be patient. You had to spend a lot of time working through minutia. I had a lot of long days, but I also got to work with a really talented team of people. And one of the lessons I learned from my one of my first managers was to thank your coworkers for their hard work, and I still apply that every day when I work with technicians and receptionists at our veterinary practice. The middle years I kind of define as that time when I was in my mid-20s. I was getting a little bit bored with the work I was doing. I was newly married and decided to take the next step in my career path. I actually applied to the Duke Business School and to UNC's Department of Computer Science, and had to make a decision of which route I was going to go on. And with some guidance from my husband, we decided that probably my best opportunities were with the computer science department. And I really do, I feel like that made a huge difference in my life. The experience really taught me toughness when I was here. It was like any graduate program, extremely rigorous. There were some really challenging classes. I still cringe when I think about the theory of computation class with Dr. Prinz. There was an NP complete homework set that I still, 26 years later, have nightmares about. It was, boy, I still remember, I can still point to the page in that book where that homework was, because it really was tough. But it also taught me to really think through a problem, and that has served me well over time. In the spring of 1991, I took what turned out to be a pivotal class that really made me stop and think about life and what did I want to do. And it had a fairly benign title, Seminar in Professional Practice. It was taught by Dr. Brooks, and the description of the course was the role and responsibility of the computer scientist in a corporate environment and as a consultant. Now, I'm going to be honest, I took the class because that was the spring I was taking the DWE, and I wanted a really easy class that wasn't going to be too taxing. And I thought, well, this will be easy. I can just sit in the seminar and it'll work out great. But Dr. Brooks made us really think about life lessons and what did we want to do with our lives? What did we really want to achieve? And he talked about when he was working at IBM and he was thinking about this program and how to live below your means so you can achieve your goals later on. He talked to us about writing a 5, 10, and 20-year plan, thinking about what you want to be doing in the future. And it was the first time I really thought about those sorts of lessons in life. It made me think about what I was doing at IBM. It was a transition period in corporate America where the cradle-to-grave job was disappearing. And I saw a lot of my peers being let go. I started thinking about the work I was doing and the fact that I wasn't very satisfied doing that work. And I started to kind of reconsider what I wanted to be doing. It was also at that time in 1992 that one of our dogs went acutely blind, and I spent a lot of time in the ophthalmology department at the veterinary college. I started really kind of looking around, talking to some of the students and the residents about what their experiences were, and it started those wheels turning for what did I really want to do. So I started looking at the prerequisites for veterinary school. I realized that as an engineer and as a computer scientist, I didn't have a whole lot of biology in my background. So I had one chemistry class in college because that's all you needed as an electrical engineer at the time. So I had to go back and take all these classes. I did my pre-vet coursework at Meredith College mainly because it was local. It was also a program that was geared towards returning students, so most of their classes were in the evenings. I continued to work at IBM, and I did my classwork at night, not telling anyone really what my ultimate plan was. I also started to volunteer at the vet school, and one of my jobs was giving tours of the vet school. So those tour guide skills that I developed at Northwestern, I could apply to the veterinary college. And it gave me a chance to get to know the whole college, to get to know the teaching hospital, to speak passionately to prospective students about the veterinary school. And it also gave me a chance to meet a lot of faculty and to get to see how the program was organized. About that time, in 1995, the veterinary school decided that it was time to start looking at transitioning from paper medical records to electronic records. And they were looking for programmers to work on this design and implementation of an electronic record system, starting from the ground zero. There were none. There were no veterinary teaching hospitals that were using electronic records. So they were really kind of on the forefront of this. So it was an opportunity for me to use my computer science degree, kind of transition into veterinary medicine. And so when I was offered the job at the veterinary school, I gave IBM a Valentine in 1995 and I resigned after my 10 years there. Started working at the veterinary teaching hospital. This is actually a picture of what's called the teaching animal unit. It's a National Historic Landmark. It's one of the oldest buildings in Raleigh. It's right now houses cows and horses that are used to teach veterinary students, and I think it's one of the very unique things about North Carolina State's veterinary program. But I worked with a team of 3 other programmers, and we were trying to boil the ocean with a Bunsen burner, basically, with this project. We were working with 16 services within the hospital, all of the disciplines within veterinary medicine: oncology, neurology, ophthalmology, small animal surgery, large animal surgery, orthopedic surgery, plus all the supporting services, the clinic path lab, the virology lab, central service, which is the group that sterilizes and prepares the surgery packs. You don't really think about that part of the hospital, but it's a vital part of the hospital. They all had their own requirements. They all had their own set of rules, and none of them liked to talk to the other guy. And so it was quite the challenge. We did get parts of it working. The lab request ordering, which is probably the most used part of any veterinarian's day, is ordering lab tests for chemical analysis of blood, urine, spinal fluid. So we did get that part of the project working and running, and we did have some of the services that we got running. But it became a huge project that the university realized after a few years was not achievable with the funding they had. And so they ultimately purchased a package from the University of Georgia that they're using now. But it was a great experience. It did give me a chance to kind of transition between my worlds at that point. And I was accepted into the veterinary college in 1997. At that point, I realized I needed a lot more money to be a full-time veterinary student, and it was a heady time to be a programmer. You could get a lot of money as a contract programmer, so I worked as a contractor for ABB Power Systems, which was on Centennial campus. I was working on their object-oriented conversion of their power system design software. I knew nothing about power systems, but I knew a lot about object-oriented programming, and so it was a great opportunity. It was on NC State's campus, so it was convenient. I worked the summer before vet school. I worked 10 hours a week during my first year of vet school, and then I worked that summer between my first and second years of vet school. So I was still a little bit into programming when I was in veterinary college. I then was full-time in the 90s, and then through 2001 when I graduated, and started on this new life. And this is me with our dog Holly, who was a cancer patient survivor twice. She was also the model for the statue at the vet school. If you ever are on the campus of the veterinary teaching hospital and there's a statue of a dog and a cat, that's that dog right there. And she passed in 2002. She had bladder cancer, and it was the loss of a soulmate when we lost her. So if you look at the skills that you need to be a veterinarian and a computer scientist, they're very similar. If you're a computer scientist, you analyze requirements, you define the problem, you implement the solution, you test the solution, you test it some more, and then you analyze what went wrong. If you're a veterinarian or a physician, you examine the patient, you collect data, you do lab work, you do x-rays, you do ultrasounds, you do biopsies. You define what is the problem here, and then you prescribe the treatment. Is it medication? Is it surgery? Is it euthanasia sometimes? And then you do a causal analysis when things don't always go right. Every doctor has a bone pile. you're not right 100% of the time, but you try to learn from those mistakes and you go on. When I was in vet school, I really felt that the veterinary students who excelled were the ones who had diverse backgrounds, that hadn't come straight from a biology undergraduate degree and went right into vet school. It was the people who had life experience and were able to think and analyze data. And as I was putting this together, there was an NPR blog entry this week about rethinking medical education and about the rapid change of medical knowledge every few years. And I've seen it in veterinary medicine. I mean, when you're a student, it's like drinking from a fire hose every day, all day long. When you're a clinician, it's harder to keep up with those new changes, but we are required to do 20 hours of education each year, which helps us stay abreast. And as a clinician, especially with Dr. Google looking over your shoulder, you have to stay really on top of what's going on, because your clients are coming in with these sheets of paper. I read this on the internet, or I read this from Dr. Google, and you have to be ready to either support it and say, yep, you went to a really good site there, or no, this is wrong. And so what the human medical field is looking at now is developing a treatment plan for the patient in the context of their social situation. And as veterinarians, I've been doing that for the past 14 years because I worked in rural practices. I've seen people come in with $100 and that's all they've got. And you have to come up with a solution within that context. A lot of times I've dealt with clients that couldn't read or write. I've dealt with clients who did not speak English. So you really have to work within the context of the people you're treating and the animals they own. The perception of what a feline practitioner, I work exclusively with cats now. My friends and family think that I get to play with little sweet orange kittens all day long and get to have cute little cuddly kitties that I deal with. And I get maybe one of those a week, and those are great. But then the rest of the week we have these characters that really don't want to see us. They're really not happy to be there. They're gator rolling on the table, they're peeing, they're pooping, they're biting, they're growling. And it's a challenge. And we have a wonderful support staff at our hospital that knows how to deal with these sorts of characters. And we have techniques for handling them. I was just going to run through a few case studies real quickly just to give you kind of a feel for what some of the challenges are that you deal with, and how really being able to analyze the case allows you to treat these patients. First case is a little gruesome. This is Jake. He was abandoned, tied to a tree by his previous owners. His current owner took him in, brought him in for treatment. This was the tumor on his eye. I was sure this was a malignancy. I didn't want it treated. I pleaded with her to just put this dog down. He was vicious. He was hard to handle. She pleaded with me to treat the dog. So we did surgery, removed the eye, moved some skin around on his face to close it. Histopath came back. That was a totally benign tumor. The dog is still living. He's doing great. He lives in a backyard now with a doghouse and a loving family. Bear is the black dog on the side here. He had been used for training pit bulls, fighting pit bulls. He was an animal abuse case in Johnston County a couple of years ago. The rescue organization that brought him in really brought him in for euthanasia. He had a broken leg, a left front leg. His radius and ulna were poking out of the skin, had been that way for a couple of weeks, were infected. He was intact. He was heartworm positive. He was literally 2 minutes from euthanasia when the staff begged me to treat him. So I kicked in some of my money, they kicked in some of their money, and we amputated his leg, neutered him, and got him heartworm treated. He's now living in Maine. There's a kind of a rescue group in eastern North Carolina that transports animals up to northeastern states that actually don't have enough animals in their shelters. So he ended up having a pretty good life. Chloe came to me with a non-healing wound. This was when it was looking pretty good. That's how it looked a couple of weeks ago. This turned out to be a deep ringworm infection. It took lab samples sent to North Carolina State's lab, ultimately to Colorado State's fungal lab, and then to the Texas pathology lab that was able to DNA sequence the fungus and determine what this was. The treatment is a lifetime of an antifungal drug that cat actually takes in butter. So the cat's living a pretty good life getting a pat of butter every day. And Chloe hates us. Chloe will kill us just for looking at her. So we've learned, we sort of have a detente between us. She and I kind of get along now, but she's not a happy camper. Shazina had been found in a dumpster with a burned face and an infected ear. We actually removed that ear and moved some skin around on her head to close it. The picture on the side there is when she was at an adoption event at a radio station. She was ultimately adopted and is doing quite well without her ear. She doesn't care. She doesn't have an ear. And then Mary is one of our patients who has GI lymphoma. She presented with stones in her ureters. We couldn't figure out why we knew she was hypocalcemic. She went to the vet school. They treated the stones in the ureters, but never gave a diagnosis for the hypocalcemia. We ultimately, on testing at our hospital, were able to aspirate her lymph nodes and her abdomen. Through DNA testing of the lymph cells, we determined that it was a type of lymphoma. She then went into liver failure that we were able to reverse. She was looking pretty good at this point. When she was at her peak, she was more yellow than a highlighter. Stopped eating. Owners put in a feeding tube. This cat right now, her bill is about $25,000. This couple loves this cat. They're a young couple. They've sold their wedding rings, 2 of their cars. All of their debt is in this cat. She's in remission. Hopefully we can keep her that way. But this is kind of the heartbreak you deal with, because you're dealing with people's emotions a lot of the time. But it was a challenge to get to the bottom of why she had this hypocalcemia. So in kind of looking at what it takes to be a veterinarian or a computer scientist, you have to ask yourself, is it the character trait of the person, or is it the educational opportunities they were afforded? And I think it's both. I think computer science attracts people who like attention to detail, like solving problems, like to get down to the minutiae of the problem. But I also think that the education that we're afforded allows us to hone those skills and to really understand how to solve a problem. And that's really what I learned here, was how to solve a problem. It's all the same. Define the problem, design a solution, implement and test, and then do a causal analysis of what went wrong. And as I said, every doctor has a bone pile. You have to just do a causal analysis. So how can I not have this happen again? And sometimes you're dealing with a biological creature, and stuff happens sometimes. It's unpredictable. I like this quote from Grandma Moses: "Life is what we make it, always has been, always will be," and I think you need to make the most of the life you're given. It goes by in a flash. These are our dogs in their youth, Tootsie and Ivy, enjoying the ocean. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Do you ever want to program again? I mean, is there
it does.
Write a little program to help yourself?
It does, and our hospital is 95% paper-free. We'd use a software package called Cornerstone, which is a Windows-based product. We have digital radiography. I don't get into the nuts and bolts of programming anymore. I do have that desire to create, and I find that outlet in quilting now, because it's kind of the same notion. But I do miss that satisfaction of writing a program and seeing it run, and kind of that was great fun. But
you're in control.
You're in control. You're not in control of these little guys. I mean, this is what I wish my day was like: happy, sleepy little orange kittens all day long. But yeah, I do miss it a little bit sometimes. Thanks.
I
Yes.
just want to say I think it's a fascinating story, and you're charming, and we, as dog lovers, pet lovers in general, we in our 50 years of marriage, we're now 4 years without a dog. And you're right, they are your family, and trying to help them is a wonderful thing, and how you marshal your background in computer science into something like this is wonderful.
Thank you.
Congratulate you.
Thank you. Yes.
Do you use your data from your practice to communicate outside your practice?
Yes. Yes, we do. Frequently, we will our digital radiography has helped us a lot. Our digital X-rays, we can easily upload those to the veterinary college, to surgical referral hospitals in the area. The veterinary specialty hospital actually has their record system set up so we can log on and check the records of our patients who are there, so that we're not playing phone tag with the clinicians. We can stay abreast of what's their status. Are they alive? Are they dead? Are they, what's their treatment status? We can also email our records to whatever practice the client, if they move, if they need them sent to another practice, we can email them to the other practice. So we communicate in that way. Like anybody else, we have a web presence for our practice. We have a Facebook page. We have a Twitter account. Yes?
So do you think the digital systems in veterinary medicine are actually ahead of the human?
I think so, because we don't have the HIPAA requirements.
Exactly, that's what I was thinking.
We don't. We still respect the confidentiality of our patients and their owners, but we don't have that tight of a control, so we don't have to.
Systems talk better to each other.
Yes. Yeah, there are fewer systems, for one thing. Or really only two. There's IDEX, Cornerstone, and then there's Avamark, which is associated with a company called Antech. Those are the two big players in the veterinary software world. So there's only two that have to talk to each other.
I'd like for everyone to thank Mary again. And we need to get
early 90s, and she took an interesting trajectory as after getting a degree in computer science, decided her passion lied in veterinary school, and she in fact went to our other local university, NC State, and in fact found herself in a completely different world and excitement. So we'll have Mary tell you about how computer science led to where she is today. Thank you, Mary.
Great. Thank you. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all today. I never imagined my career path would take me to veterinary medicine when I was here in the late 80s, early 90s. That's why I kind of have two ribbons. I spanned, just like anything else in my life, I had one difference when I had to survive Chicago winters when it was minus 20 degrees outside. And it taught me patience. We were a controlled data university at the time, and so a lot of my programming was in a programming language called Compass for the CDC cyber machine. It was a big deal when you got to run your program on the cyber. I still have boxes of Hollerith cards. I'm kind of a pack rat, so I've saved all those cards. But it really taught me to be a perfectionist in some levels, which has served me well in my surgery time with my patients. I was at Northwestern from 1981 through 1985, and one of the cats to death, and you kind of have an image in your mind of the stereotypical, single cat lady that has 8 or 12 cats in her house. But this gentleman breaks that stereotype, as do many of my clients. I have an amazing array of clients, from a Nobel laureate to a homeless person. So you just never know who's going to come through your doorstep on a daily basis. The foundation, I really have to give credit to Northwestern University, where I did my undergraduate work. This was an extremely competitive environment. I was in the engineering program at Northwestern. It taught me to think. It taught me to analyze problems. It taught me endurance, 1 foot in one decade and 1 foot in the other decade. But I really do feel like a lot of the lessons I learned here, I still apply on a daily basis when I'm dealing with my patients at the cat hospital. It started out at IBM, 1985, as a software developer working on assembly code. And now I work with wonderful pet owners. This is one of my favorite clients, Greg and his little kitty Missy. Greg is not your expected cat owner. He's a father with young daughters. He has 3 young cats that he adopted from a rescue group. He loves these cats.
And today we're going to have exciting places where this journey has ended that might not have been, easily predicted. How one starts with a background in computer science and becomes a veterinarian, an entrepreneur, or just, how it changes their thinking of how new ideas and things are going to affected their life. So I think this is an exciting session, a different idea. It'll be technical in different ways, but it's more about computer science as the journey. And I think in many cases, this is an interesting aspect of all disciplines, is where, often when we're in college, we don't know where these things are going to lead us, and we're going to find out today. Our first speaker is Mary Szymkowski. She was a graduate student here in the